so many thongs in a gym like you wouldn't believe. And I swear to God, one time I was sure I saw where the sun does not shine. I'm like,
Yeah, I mean, I would do it with. It's really embarrassing that I think back on with nothing on because I just thought like, okay, it's sort of like skin tight.
yeah, it shows the shape, but
Yeah, and it wasn't like the crotch was skin tight, so I wasn't really worried about that.
yeah.
And plus, like when you're climbing, your front is to the wall.
Yeah.
So I thought like people might see the outline of my butt, but no, it wasn't just the outline. Like you could see through them when they stretched out. It was a really horrible choice.
Oh.
I regret it.
Ooh.
And I'm like, I've never been back since I discovered that. I'm like, I can't
If
look
it's
at
any
those people.
consolation, I mean, this is Osaka. You're probably not going to see the same person 2 times unless they work there.
Well, at a climbing gym, it's a bit more of a small
It is a
society.
restricted circle, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is.
kind of a maniac subculture.
Yeah.
For the Tribes of Babel Podcast. I apologize. There's going to be a bit of an echo in this. I hope it's not completely intolerable to listen to. I'm here with my friend Isabel Berg from our creative circle, Creative Osaka. She's actually in her last 2 weeks
Yes, last 2 weeks.
in Japan. So I caught her just before she left. So Isabel, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Completely unprepared here. Student. I study physics, also Japanese. So I'm in Japan studying Japanese, but going home in 10 days.
So why physics and Japanese?
That's a difficult question. No, I have a personal interest in Japan, but physics is kind of where, I don't know, I started out in engineering, and then, I don't know, I was more interested in physics, so ended up switching,
As a non-science person, it seems to me like physics would be a part of engineering. So what's the what's the change? I'm sure you took classes that related to physics and studying physics as an engineering student.
Yeah.
What's the big change in major?
Well, the thing was my engineering study was actually petroleum engineering, because I'm from Norway, we got a lot of oil.
Mm-hmm.
But then when the crisis hit a few years ago, it's become very difficult to find a job. So my engineering study was focusing on oil. So I had a lot of classes about, oil.
Mm-hmm.
Not that much about physics. So when I switched over to physics, I ended up studying mostly just physics and math, and not so much chemistry and geology and those kinds of classes.
What's the crisis a few years ago when you say the crisis? Are you referring to like the sort of 2008 financial crisis?
No, I'm not referring to the financial crisis. There was a separate crisis in the oil sector around 2013,
Mm-hmm.
2014. I can't remember.
Okay.
Well, the thing was, up until that point, a lot of the Arabic countries had retained some of their oil to make sure the market didn't get flooded. Then they decided that, no, we're not going to do that anymore. So they started selling all the oil they actually had been holding up. And that immediately dropped the oil price considerably. And the problem for especially the Norwegian market is that extracting our oil is very expensive,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not on land, it's at sea.
Okay.
So our oil is, the sell price has to be a certain level for it to actually be
Profitable.
Yeah. So a lot of projects got halted. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of, even more so than the actual direct rig people, the surrounding professions around it, like people who do transport, people who do even just the treatment that the oil gets once it's back ashore before being sold. So a lot of surrounding people also got fallout from it.
That's very interesting. It's not something I think that the average person thinks about often, but like there are places where it's cheaper to get oil and places where it's more expensive, even if it's the same amount of oil,
Yeah.
the same abundance of
Yeah.
oil.
I mean, the oil itself is not equal.
Right.
The content of the oil will be different.
Right. There's heavy oil and light oil.
And then especially like depending on where you're extracting from, there might be more or less natural gas in the oil as well.
Okay.
So the contents between like gas and raw oil, that's why it has to get treated after you've actually extracted it, because you have to separate it.
Okay.
So there's a lot of other stuff happening too. It's not just taking it out and then you can sell it.
So what was the reason for the sort of, we said it was the Arabian countries or the Arabian Peninsula?
I honestly don't know. I don't know why they decided. I'm assuming there was either something political or something economical that, motivated that.
Do you think it was designed to go after competing oil-producing countries?
I don't think so.
No?
No.
Okay.
I don't know enough about it. Like, I was just starting out as a student at the time. Like, I was 18 when this happened, and just, people were saying that, yeah, it's going to get better. It will get itself, back up to the normal level as before. But I think what kind of happened around this is that a lot of companies, they couldn't really deny it anymore, that they've had this spending kind of attitude towards it where they don't care about how much they spend because they're earning enough money that they don't have to care.
Sure.
So, like, expenses were through the roof. And then after this crisis and, everything is not so profitable anymore, you kind of have to deal with, you have to cut costs and you have to, you have to limit your expenses and not, you can't be, hosting parties for everyone, free drinks, free food, free cruises, you can't do that. That's not, in the first place, that's not reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, it's like, you can't deny it anymore. You have to change this culture.
Mm.
So a lot around not just the market itself, but also the way that companies and people thought about it changed because of this.
Do you think that's going to have any impact on the sort of like socialist model? Because that's obviously another place where there's high costs, right? It's not directly in the industry itself.
Yeah.
But
I honestly don't know.
No.
I'm assuming that because the industry is quite large in Norway, so I'm assuming it affects enough people that it actually might well have an effect. I don't know.
That's interesting. Well, I'm not trying to do an economics podcast. I don't know enough to ask enough intelligent questions about that. So the reason, the main reason I invited Isabel on today was because we had a conversation yesterday, sort of a themed, creative, prompted meetup about migration and migrations as a general topic, and we started. We have these free-form conversations, right, where no one said, like, okay, now let's talk about this, or here's my thesis on migration. But we had a lot of interesting things come up. And one thing that immediately stuck out to me is like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do the podcast about, was you were talking about being from one part of Norway as a child, moving to another part of Norway while you're still a child, and having to deal with restructuring your social identity or your outward identity through your dialect and the language you spoke. So I know you said a lot of it yesterday, and I hate to make you feel like you're repeating yourself, but it was really interesting to me, and I'm not even sure I completely absorbed all of it. So if you wouldn't mind talking about that again.
Yeah, I guess we could just repeat the conversation.
Okay, sure.
Conversation is probably not going to go the same way anyway.
No, probably won't, but we can try.
Yeah. Well, the basis for it is, I think this is true for a lot of countries, that there's dialects, and they can vary, well, considerably. But I think especially in Norway, it's like there's so many different dialects depending on what part of the country you're from. It's not a big country. It's about the same size as Japan. But, and even the people, there's so few people, like about a little over 5 million in total.
Yeah.
It's a very small population. But even so, the language, the way it changes depending on your dialect is so considerable that your dialect says a lot about where you're from. I think for most people in Norway, if you're an adult, you have enough experience with different kinds of dialects that you can pinpoint someone at least roughly where they're from based on how they're talking. So I guess the main point is both intonation, like the way it sounds. I think Norwegian is known as a singing language. It's very sing-songy kind of the way you intone your sentences. But in addition, it's also which words you choose and your grammatical endings, how you shorten words, because spoken language and written language is very different.
Mm-hmm.
As a, 11-year-old, 10-year-old, we ended up moving because I grew up about as far north as you can go and still be on like main coast.
Like Tromsø.
Yeah, so like not on an island.
Yeah.
when we moved about halfway down. So it's still northern Norway. It's still considered pretty far north.
About roughly like what would be the nearest city or?
Nearest one is Bodø.
Okay.
So it's past the polar circle.
Okay.
So it's pretty far north.
Okay.
But is it past the polar circle? We have northern lights.
All right.
Yeah. But the dialects, even though they're both northern Norway, the distance is so great that the dialects are also very, very different.
How many kilometers or miles between them is there?
Is it about 600 kilometers?
Okay.
Might be more, 800.
But so over the course of 600, 800 kilometers, it's the dialect is so different that there's like an identity attached to it. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not, it's difficult to pinpoint an identity because, I mean, every person has their own identity.
Of course.
It's just, I think there is a certain kind of stereotypical perception of how someone with a certain dialect would behave. But that's, in most of the cases, that's not correct.
Okay.
I mean, it's a stereotype.
I think that's probably true in every country, including Japan and the U.S. For example, you said something yesterday about people from one area being considered more boorish or vulgar.
Yeah. And that's particularly between South and North because there is more people living in Southern Norway. The population in Northern Norway is quite small. I mean, it's small to begin with, but it's even smaller there. So most of it is just rural areas with no trains, no very few buses, very little connections. You kind of, it's as good as it gets. But there is a conception that people from Northern Norway in general are very vulgar, and especially when it comes to cursing. We talked a bit about this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not entirely wrong. People in Northern Norway do tend to use curse words more. It's just not intended as cursing. It's used as strongifiers to signify that you feel very strongly about this, or the degree of it is very high.
Mm.
So I don't know, the usage, the way people think about it is different. And I think also in addition, people in Northern Norway they're regarded as more open and more welcoming, more. I don't even know how to describe it. Like my personal experience when I moved from like all the way up north to halfway up north. I think the biggest change for me was that even though the towns were about the same size, about 800 people, so super tiny.
Yeah.
The people all the way up north, they were a lot more welcoming.
Okay.
Like they wanted you to be a part of their society. They wanted you to feel welcomed and to be included and
you're
to
saying you felt that, not that it's a stereotype,
Yes.
but you actually felt that.
I felt that. And then moving halfway down, it was this oddly secluded society where, and this is so weird because it's like early 2000s, and even so, it's like it's stuck in the 70s. All the women are at home with their children, and doing knitting and anything like handcraft related, while the men work at the factory. There's this silicium production plant, and then on their spare time they go hunting.
Okay.
And this is just it's odd how 800 people can conform to this and just stay isolated. Like everyone grew up there. Everyone is so like they have their friend circles. They're not interested in getting to know new people. It felt very strange to come in there because it didn't feel welcome at all.
Okay.
You're outsiders. You're labeled as outsiders and you get treated as it.
So how did the language? You said yesterday like there's different pronouns.
Yeah.
That I think as an English speaker, as a native English speaker, that's a hard one to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
As somebody who's learned Japanese, I've gotten more familiar with the idea of there being different pronouns.
Yeah.
For like in English, we only have the only difference is object subject, right?
Yeah,
so you
so
say
I
I or me,
yeah.
right? But there's that's just a grammatical
Yeah.
difference. Whereas in Japanese, there's whether you're being a braggart or whether you're being humble or
But it
whether
also
you're being
depends
polite.
on your gender, right?
And yeah,
There's
well,
gendered
gender's
language.
part of that, right?
Yeah.
It's all sort of social in-group, out-group, and then
Yeah. Yeah,
hierarchical
yeah,
up-down
yeah.
and politeness levels.
Yeah.
And then there's also, whether you're speaking to an enemy is another one, like kisama for you. Which in modern real Japanese, I don't think hardly almost ever gets used.
It's
probably.
actually interesting because I heard it in this movie where it was like around, I think it was like 600 BC. And he used kisama as it was this very, very extremely polite way of speaking towards someone. It was just extremely polite.
That's the other thing too, right? Is that like what the rules are now is not what they always were.
No.
I've seen that with kisama, and then you can see it in the fact that it ends with sama, right? It has the honorific ending at the end. So it's odd that it became a negative term, a term for an enemy.
I'm assuming it's just kind of like mocking someone by being extremely polite. Like,
yeah,
you're obviously not intending to be polite.
That was my take on it too. That there at some point along the line, it probably got used sarcastically more than it got used sincerely. So that's interesting. But like English, the only one of those in English that really jumps out off the top of my head is the plural you. So English used to have two words for you. It used to have thou and you. And so thou was used as like the common term when you were speaking down to someone or you were speaking to an equal. It was the more casual. It was the more direct. And then you was the elevated,
honorable,
speaking up to someone or speaking highly politely. And you was also used as the plural. And this parallel still kind of exists in modern English. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but like in English, there's the royal we.
Yeah.
The queen refers to herself as we, and that's the way that monarchs speak. And so we is plural, but in the case of the monarch speaking, it's not plural, right? It's singular about the monarch. And you was the same way. You was actually plural, but it was also used as an honorific to sort of address people. And then thou died out, and now you's all we have, so it doesn't mean anything anymore. But as a result, we don't have a plural word for you, right? We have we and us for I, but we don't have a plural word for you. So every dialect of English kind of has its own. In the American South, famous one is y'all. Yeah. And even some places it's y'all for a small group and all y'all for a bigger group. Yeah. In California and I think a lot of the U.S., it's you guys, regardless of gender, male, female. There's yous, I think, in some parts of the East Coast. And I believe also in the UK. Yeah. There's yous guys. There's a few of them. I can't remember all of them right now, but that's one of the few places in English where, depending on the pronoun someone uses, you can get a feel for where they
where they're from.
They came from. But that's about the only one I can think of. So in Norwegian, what kinds of differences are there? I think you said even the word for I changes.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring it up because we don't have different words for you, for referring to someone else or a group or anything like that. It's just, or maybe we do. I haven't actually thought about that.
Okay.
But like the first thing that comes to my mind is that the actual word you use for I, as in, because any Germanic language, you do use the word I a lot because you have to specify your subject. Mm-hmm. So it comes up a lot. You hear it a lot. And in standardized language, when it comes to writing, there are no options. There's just a one. And it's the same as they would pronounce it in Oslo, in the capital. But different regions in Norway have wildly different words for the concept of I.
Okay.
And it's something you use so often. I think it's difficult for that not to be a part of your identity.
Sure. I mean, especially when it literally is your word for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, this is probably not going to be very helpful for people who listen, but the actual word that I would use, or maybe like first a standardized word is jeg. And the pronunciation can vary a little bit, but it's spelled jeg. So it's like J-E-G.
Okay.
But so that's like southeastern Norway. That's what you would use there. But as soon as you go to the west coast, it turns into egg. Jeg or egg.
Okay.
Which sound very different, right?
Yes.
And Britain-wise, it's E-G. So you're just missing the J on the front. But now suddenly the G is audible. You can hear it.
Yeah.
But when you start going north, the most common one is A.
Okay.
And this is a letter that doesn't even exist in English. Okay. So it's an A and an E combined, but you can't type that in English. But that's how you pronounce it, the sound that exists in Norwegian.
Say it one more time.
A.
A. Okay.
But then there's some local variations. Like most of northern Norway uses this A, but there's some regions like in the middle where they say E. So it's just I, the letter E.
Okay.
I have a few friends who use that. To me, it sounds odd because I just don't know that many people who use it. Okay. But that's another one. And then the particular region where my parents live now, it's a very, very, very small region where they do this, but they say E. So the letter E.
That's
so an E.
That's the E, okay.
So you have standardized jeg, Western egg, Northern Norway A, and then some regions E, and then my region E.
Okay.
The odd thing for me here is that my parents are from different regions. So I grew up hearing different things. So my mom is from the western coast, so she says egg. But my dad is from the region where they live now, so he says E. But then both me and my sisters, we've been moving around, so we both have this different kind of input. Mm-hmm. So she says yay, for whatever reason, that's something it seems to be up and coming in the younger generation right now. It's coming from the bigger cities, so like from people who have a lot of connections with Bodø, the closest city. They tend to use this. I have friends who are my age who also use it. They also tend to go there a lot. I have friends from there.
So the EI sounds more urbane and like metropolitan.
It's difficult. The connotation that I get from it is that it sounds kind of. I don't even know how I feel about it. It doesn't really have a feeling. Doesn't really have much. It's just a word.
Okay.
It sounds a little city language, but it doesn't sound posh. It doesn't sound.
Okay.
It's not. There's no arrogance involved. There's no.
Sounds young. Maybe you said a lot of young.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess it does have a kind of young feel. No elderly person in this region would say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that says something.
Yeah. So yeah, for me personally, it's this word is. It's not difficult because language tends to just come out. You don't really have a conscious thought about it. It just happens.
Yeah.
But I switch. So depending on who I've been speaking with last and what dialect they're using, I just kind of match it. So if I'm talking to my mom or if I'm visiting like her relatives on the western coast, I will switch over to say egg. But if I'm talking with a lot of my friends from that region where I moved from, then I would say ah. But speaking to some of my friends there who are from this very small town, they would say eh, and I might start saying that.
Okay. When did you first start? So which was the first one you used as a real young child, and when did you first start using a different one? And how conscious was or wasn't it?
I honestly have no idea. I think you'd be better off asking my mom.
Okay.
No, because I was 2 years old when we moved away from the western coast. I'm assuming I already spoke enough to say egg.
Yeah.
But when we moved, because we moved all the way from coast, like all the way up north, and there everybody said ah, so I said that too.
If you meet a Norwegian in Japan,
yeah,
and for the first time you're meeting them, what do you default to?
I actually have a problem right now that I have no one to speak Norwegian with.
Oh really?
Yeah.
0 people.
Yeah, there is a Norwegian guy, but we live really far away and we don't really meet.
Okay.
And I'm not using my Norwegian. I sometimes use it over Skype. But that's always with my mom, so I'm just defaulting to hers.
Sure.
But that's not what I normally talk. Normally I talk with the general, like, northern Norwegian kind of dialect where I would say ah. But I have a problem now that every time I'm prompted to speak Norwegian, because I had a friend visiting a week ago, I've forgotten how it's supposed to sound like.
Really?
It's very frustrating because I know the words and I want to say them. I just don't know how to pronounce them. It's this very, very strange feeling of being disconnected with your own...
Really?
Language is difficult, especially when it's your mother tongue and then not being able to pronounce it. It's very distressing.
Again, there's certain things about being a native English speaker that make it hard to understand certain experiences that I think that come from people who are natives of other languages. But like English is so its level of penetration into like global culture is so intense that I could not escape it if I wanted to. And I have never even thought about trying, but like I would have to basically stop all the entertainment that I watch, like everything that I consume. Even living in Japan, I'd say like probably still at most 35% of what I'm watching is in languages other than English, including Japanese, right? So the majority is still in English. Do you make a conscious effort to like listen to Norwegian music or watch Norwegian movies or
I'm
read?
Not conscious about it at all.
No.
It's just, I mean, my general consumption, even when I'm back home, it's still mostly English because we don't dub stuff.
Yeah.
We just, everything comes the way it is. I mean, we have Norwegian entertainment. That's not it. It's just, I don't have a TV back home, so I can't watch Norwegian television.
Okay.
And I mean, I do when I'm at someone's house or when I'm at home with my parents, then of course, but... And of course, still, like, on the radio, it's still going to be in Norwegian. And when people are talking around you, it's in Norwegian all the time, of course. But the entertainment that I consume, especially when I'm outside of Norway, I do listen to Norwegian artists, but they also tend to sing in English.
Yeah.
Because there's a bigger market to hit.
Sure, yeah. Like,
I only have, like, a couple of select artists that sing in Norwegian. I have, especially this one artist that I really like because he's singing in my dialect. And that's very, very rare because there's not that many people talking it. It's like at most maybe like 100,000 people.
Let's talk about that because that was something I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
I think in America, well, in English, there have been authors who have made their mark by writing not in standard English, by writing in a dialect, like Mark Twain famously. would play with Southern dialects. In Japanese, there's a few authors or a few TV personalities who sort of broke the barrier of using kansai ben, and I mean now it's become its own thing. Kansai ben has become like the language of comedy in Japan. But there's like writers that write in dialects within Japan. I think it's a phenomenon that happens. I don't know a ton about UK dialects, but I do know that there's periods of time where like Cockney or certain varieties of English are like not welcome in movies or not welcome in the theater community, and then some actor will sort of break through that wall. So it sounds like there must be some degree of that in Norway, that certain dialects don't make much of an appearance.
Yeah, I mean, every dialect, like the size wise, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
Even though I can say standardized, like generally in Western Norway they would use the word ek, but there's still like there's tens and hundreds maybe even of dialects even just on the Western coast as a region where they talk differently, where they use different words, where the intonation is different, where I think there is this kind of like us you kind of thing about it just because of how you identify based on it. It's like, yes, I'm from this region, so
so some of it's intentionally trying to maintain an
I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just a natural consequence of the dialects being so different. Okay. But even so, it's the thing is, like, just a couple decades ago, standardized television, the main channel, like, so basically Norwegian NHK and that cool, and that channel, it would always be produced in Oslo, the capital. So all the people doing it would be from Oslo because you're living there to work. So all the dialects you would hear on television, it would all be Oslo dialect. And all the television show, like, for kids, for young kids, we do dub stuff. So all the dubbers would also be talking in Oslo dialect.
Okay.
So me as a child, I remember when I was growing up, there was this, because we were, on the complete opposite side of the country, like maybe probably around 2,000 kilometers away. It's really far. And everything we heard on television was this completely different dialect. Like, it's not even relatable.
Okay.
I could try to speak it, but it would sound really odd.
Yeah.
But we used that when we were playing.
Yeah.
It was this playtime voice, like play pretend.
I can totally understand that. I mean, it's not unlike the way to a lot of American kids, British English sounds like Lord of the Rings speak, because that's the only place they've seen it so far, right? Or heard it so far. That's
something that, growing up, you would still hear it all the time, but it's kids playing.
Yeah.
And it sounds odd because you don't actually know how to use it. It's just what you picked up yourself from television.
Yeah.
But I remember growing up, the first time I met someone who was actually from Oslo was one of my teachers. It was like 5th grade. And I remember being so like, ooh. Like, I think my first initial thought was like, why does he speak like that? He's an actual person speaking like that. It's like, it was so odd for me.
Yeah.
Because I just never met anyone.
Yeah.
It's just,
like he's actually a cartoon character.
Yeah, like and the worst part is him as a person. He is kind of like a cartoon character. He's really like, he's a very, very good teacher. He's very, very good with children. Very, very warm. Very, I don't even know how to describe him. It's just, but he's such a character. He has so much personality that it was kind of difficult not to view him as a cartoon character. But either way, like, growing up, I mean, people migrate all the time.
Yeah.
People move around, especially for jobs.
Yeah.
So wherever you go in Norway, there's going to be people talking different dialects, even wildly different dialects. So over time, you kind of accumulate enough experience to start. So you have this friend who talks like this, and they're from there. So next time you meet someone who talks like that, you're like, oh, you must be from there.
Yeah.
So just over time, you have a big enough social circle that you start getting these pinpoints for where different dialects belong.
Yeah.
But I think for children, it's more difficult to navigate that.
Of course, children. We touched upon yesterday a little bit, and a variety of other topics. Children, they have no frame of reference because everything's new to them, but they also there's the small world that they do know is their entire world. Yeah. So everything from outside of it seems alien or mysterious, or it's hard for them to know what to do with it, I think. Yeah, you said something interesting earlier. You said that recently the only person you speak Norwegian with is your mother.
Yeah.
And so you're just defaulting to her Norwegian.
Yeah.
As opposed to, you use the word normal as opposed to how you would normally speak.
Yeah.
So this is another interesting one, I think, being from somebody who, my parents have different native languages, right? English and Spanish, but it's hard for me to imagine like one of my parents' English being not normal, quote unquote English. So what if the language you speak with your mother, or the dialect you speak with your mother, is not normal for you? Then what is normal for you?
It's actually been difficult for me to pinpoint, because when people ask me where I'm from, I just don't have an answer.
Yeah.
Because this where you're from kind of ties in with how you talk.
Sure.
And partially also how you act. And picking one has been very difficult, because I switch all the time. It's like give me a week being one place and I will be completely switched over. It's like the switch itself takes like a couple 3 hours, but then I'll be so deep into it, I'll be forgetting how to talk differently.
Do you notice it as it's happening, or does it like
I did not.
Later? Yeah.
I did not notice until because my partner we lived together for about 4 years. The first couple years when we lived together, he was noticing this. I mean, he was seeing the switch as it happened.
Mm-hmm.
I did not.
Mm.
I didn't know about this until he brought it up.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that when I went to visit my family on the Western Coast, I would switch. But like in my daily life, according to my ex, when I get angry or upset, or if I'm frustrated, I will switch to Western dialect.
Okay.
So that's the one that my mom talks.
Okay.
So if I'm cursing, if I'm like really, really angry and I'm cursing properly, then it will be that one.
Okay.
This is kind of interesting, because while Northern Norway has this image of being the cursing dialect, when I'm cursing and I want to curse properly, then I switch to the Western one.
Well, you said that in Northern Norway, the curse words don't carry the same impact. They're not.
That's true, but when you're actually cursing, when you intend to curse, the curses are very creative.
Yeah, you said that.
They're very,
yesterday.
They're not actual words. You just make them as you go. I think the number one you hear all the time is hestkuk, which means horsecock. And that one they don't use in Southern Norway. You'd never hear it.
Okay.
You'd never hear Southern or Eastern or Western. You'd never hear it. It's only Northern Norway.
Because cock is bad enough that you don't need to add the horse to it.
Yeah, even they wouldn't use that word for cock. They would use a different word.
Okay.
So it's like we have a bunch of different words for it, like any language.
Yeah.
But that particular word is like it belongs in Northern Norway.
I think Germanic languages have an affinity for words for private parts. We have a lot for.
Yeah.
Japanese doesn't have nearly as many words for the penis.
It's so disappointing, because anytime I start delving into a different language, like the curse words kind of come first.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but with Japanese, there's just not that much to find.
Well, the big tell is I love whenever I'm reading or watching something, I love to think about how it's translated, or if it's subtitles, I always pay a lot of attention to how it was translated in the subtitles. And I mean, the big tell is like in English, shit and fuck are always translated both as kso in Japanese, which is like, those are different. Yeah, I feel very strongly. They're both I get that they're on the same wavelength, but those are very different concepts, right? So when it says like, it's fucking cold, and the subtitle is like, kso samui, I'm like, no, that's shit cold. Okay, but yeah.
No, but I agree with that. It's the usage of it is different, and the connotation of it is also different. So especially when translating, I think it becomes apparent for me when I'm talking English, because I think when you switch languages, you also switch the way you think.
Definitely.
So I'd say to some degree your personality changes a little bit.
Definitely.
So me talking English does not at all sound the same as me talking Norwegian.
Yeah.
And talking different dialects in Norwegian also does not sound the same.
Yeah.
The way I would phrase myself, or the way I would express myself, or maybe even what I would choose to say is a little different.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I mean, I feel somewhat similar to you in that living in Japan, I have encountered far more English speakers from diverse backgrounds of the English-speaking world than I ever had living in Southern California. And Southern California is a diverse place within America. I mean, if you were to, there's parts of America you could go to, you could even encounter a narrower range of people. But I think compared to the East Coast, you don't meet as many Europeans. You know, we're facing Asia as opposed to where New York is facing Europe. So I had never met many British people. Really hadn't. I mean, I'd seen plenty of British TV and British movies. I hadn't met many Australians, not many New Zealanders. I mean, for a long time I was the stereotypical American. I couldn't tell the difference between the Australian and New Zealand accent. Yeah. Now I totally can. But it's all been through living in Japan, because all the English speakers kind of end up in one basket.
Yeah.
And it's smoothed out or rounded out my dialect. If I go back to California for a while, I think I start speaking a lot more like a Southern Californian.
Yeah, so you get a more heavy kind of accent.
Yeah, and it also rounds out my personality. I think like so a small one, and it's probably not even the most prominent of the changes that have happened to me, but I say a bit now instead of a little or a little bit. I say a bit, and I think it's just from being around British people. I think they tend to say a bit.
Never noticed that.
More than a little or more than a little bit. And after being around it a lot and getting used to it, it takes less energy to say a bit than to say a little.
Shorter.
Yeah, or a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. So I have just started saying it, but it's something that when I go back to California, I feel like I'm the only person saying a bit. Like I look around and I'm like everyone, and then I think like, do they think it's weird? Do I sound pretentious to them?
Yeah.
And then, I drop it after a while.
Yeah.
I start making the effort to say a little.
Yeah, you start
again.
conforming to what's around you.
Yeah, but it's not entirely conscious, like you say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just kind of happens.
Yeah.
I've actually on the same, like when you go back and start noticing these, like people are talking differently.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have occasionally I have words that are dialect that I didn't know was dialect. I assumed they were standardized words that everyone knew and everyone would use. And I think I had one word I discovered at age 21. I've been using it for a couple of decades. And then I realized nobody understands what it means. They've never heard it.
Really?
It was this word, like, because we're sitting at lunch and we're eating. And I was eating like a baguette or something. And there was like a ton of like crumbs. It's like tiny crumbs from the baguette. And I was complaining, oh my God, there's so many crumbs. Because they were like not just in like on the plate, they're just everywhere. And I was frustrated with how it was spreading, like the fallout area was just so big. And I used this word that I have in my dialect, I did not know, for tiny crumbs, which is foos. Nobody knew what it meant. They were all so confused, like, what? There's so much what? I'm like, foos. It's foos. And they're like, what? And the worst part was, when I asked my mom about it, she knew perfectly well what it meant. But my dad didn't.
Oh, really?
He had no idea.
Really?
And I still, to this day, I can't quite pinpoint where it's from because, it's, like I mentioned, we moved around a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where I picked it up because my family on the Western Coast, they also don't know what it means. It's like Western, they don't know. Middle Norway, they also don't know. I haven't checked. Maybe it's from all the way up north. I'm not sure.
I mean, I can... to me, there's nothing strange about different regions not knowing it or knowing it. But to me, it's very surprising to hear that your mom knew it, and you are your mom's daughter, and you know it, but your dad, who I assume has lived with your mom for a long time,
they've been
know
living
it.
together for like 22 years.
And you're his daughter, and you use it. So it's odd. Like he had never heard of it.
Yeah.
Or
To be mentioned, he's my stepfather.
Oh, okay.
And also they are from different regions.
Okay.
But they've been living together for 22 years.
Okay.
It's a very long time.
Yeah.
You'd think it'd come up at some point.
Yeah.
Because I know my mom uses it like when we're talking about like is when you cut bread, there's crumbs everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So about like brushing the crumbs off the cutting board and putting it in trash.
Mm-hmm.
And the word comes up a lot like in that kind of context.
Sure.
I don't know. Maybe it's like morning habits. Like my mom gets up way earlier than my dad, and that's why it never crisscrossed. I don't know. It's so strange. I was just so shocked. I felt like my reality was kind of falling apart. Like, this is not a normal word. Can I not write this? Like, can I? I think I searched for it. I couldn't find it in a dictionary. It's just not.
Wow. That I had a moment like this is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But I had a moment like that where there's a word I don't know exactly. I couldn't draw a line around what parts of the U.S. use it and what parts don't. I know it's commonly used on the West Coast. I don't know where it stops being used, but we say, for example, if in a really super casual situation, if you want to say a little bit, here again, I'm talking about a little bit again.
Yeah.
If you're sitting down in like a booth seat at a restaurant and you don't have enough space and you tell the person next to you, like, could you scoot over a little bit? We'll often say, like, could you scoot over a skosh? Could you give me just a skosh? Or like in coffee, like, if someone says, do you want some cream? And it's like, yeah, just a skosh. So for a long time, I thought nothing of this word. To me, especially because of the way people pronounce it, they say a skosh. Give me a skosh. It sounds super Southern California.
Yeah.
It sounds very like LA. I just thought it was like a nonsense word that we'd made up. And this is funny, right? Because I've lived in Japan 11 years. I studied like No, that's an I studied like 10 years before I came. I probably had been speaking Japanese for 15 years before I went like, oh, that's the word sukoshi. That's just the American pronunciation.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's sukoshi. And so as soon as it clicked, I was like, that can't be right. So I
It came from Japanese?
jumped in the dictionary, and it's right there in the dictionary. It says like from Japanese sukoshi.
Wow.
And it's listed as like a West Coast English, American English term. And I presumably during the war, during the occupation or something. And you can understand, right? Because skosh is a word that you would contextually pick up.
Yeah.
If
It's
you're-
like if you're in a bar and
Yeah.
you're asking, you skoshi.
You would
It's
hear
like, that's enough.
skoshio. Yeah, right. Yeah, just a little.
Yeah.
So
Easy
people
to
absorbed
understand,
it
easy
and they
to-
took it back with them. And for some reason it caught on in some parts of the U.S. and not in others. But so after I realized this was Japanese and after I saw in the dictionary that it was like West Coast, I started asking, like I had a friend from Chicago. I started asking other Americans and they were like, I've never heard that word. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my God, like how many of these are there that, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
just thought that was just kind of young, hip American English, but no, it's this Japanese word that just, weirdly found itself in a completely other part of the
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
just kind of like it comes down, like started like probably like I'm guessing around like 1940s.
probably.
And
yeah.
then from there, it's gone from generation to generation and you don't know where words come from.
Yeah.
Like I thought about because I have a part-time job as a Norwegian teacher, and occasionally I'll be like, okay, so this word relates to this word, but I can't actually know because I haven't checked, like I haven't researched the etymology of it. There's so many words that I use that I have no idea of the origin of. It becomes clear when you're learning Japanese also, because when there's so many words that, well, they're foreign words, so you can easily spot them by them being in katakana.
Yeah.
But most of the time, you just kind of assume it's English.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not, even though it sounds like English.
Yeah.
My first really run-in with this was the word consento.
Consent.
Consento, it sounds like consent, right?
It does, yeah.
It means power outlet.
Right, yeah.
Because it's not from English.
What is it?
I think it's from Dutch.
Dutch? Okay.
Yeah.
They're often Dutch. Another one that threw me was randoseru. The square backpacks that the school kids wear, they're called randoseru.
Ransel.
Is it ransel?
Yeah, it's probably from German.
That one's Dutch as well, I believe.
It's Dutch. Yeah.
Because a lot of the early Japanese, when they westernized their education system, a lot of it was from like the Netherlands.
Yeah, Netherlands.
Yeah.
We actually have that word in Norwegian as well. Randstad.
Randstad? Yeah. So
we also have ryggsäck, which is rucksack.
Rucksack, yeah. Well, that one, I don't know. Again, I couldn't tell you who does and doesn't, but I know where I'm from, nobody says rucksack. It's backpack.
Oh.
Yeah.
So where does rucksack get used?
Yeah, I would have to look that up.
Does the word ruck mean anything to you?
Only in that word.
Okay, because
I only see it in books.
Yeah, because the Norwegian word ryggsäck, it's two different words. Rygg means back.
Sure. Okay.
And sack is just a
sack.
Yeah.
We say sack.
Yeah. So it's a sack you carry on your back.
Yeah. So it's backpack. Yeah.
It's a backpack.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that when I hear it.
No.
Ruck sounds like, it's a word that I don't have any meaning for, so I make up a meaning for it. So I assume rucksack sounds like ruck is like an adventure or like you're going on you're rucking.
I strongly suspect that's from German.
Yeah.
It's ryggsäck, as far as I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
It has the same meaning as Norwegian. It's back and then, a sack. So.
Yeah. Another place I run into this a lot with is food.
Yeah.
Just today when I sorry, I offered you food and then I didn't actually give it to you. We'll take a break and you can eat if you want. When I was cooking earlier, I was chopping up stuff, and like I mentioned yesterday, I've become really religious about weighing my food and tracking my calories day in, day out. And I was chopping up stuff, and I kind of, when I'm cooking, especially when I'm alone, I kind of vocalize. So while I'm talking, I'm actually saying to myself like 168 grams of mushroom.
You're narrating your cooking.
Yeah, it's
That's
just
adorable.
I think it started as like I have a bad memory.
Yeah.
So if I weigh it and I'm chopping it and I'm gonna write it down in a minute, but I don't want to forget it for that minute, I'll just kind of say it.
You keep saying it.
Yeah, I'll say it. And then that just turned into talking to myself basically. It's like I don't know. I feel like a lot of people when you're alone in your house, you kind of are a little bit crazy. You do weird stuff.
Yeah, silence does things to you.
Yeah. So I'm doing this morning, and I took what I would call a bell pepper, In Japanese, they say paprika.
Yes.
It's a big, round, sweet, not spicy pepper.
Yeah, I know it.
There's
it's
red,
paprika
yellow,
in Norwegian as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I believe in Australia, and I think also in the UK, it's paprika. I don't know. Again, in the US, some parts might call it different things, but we call it a bell pepper because it's a pepper that's shaped like a bell.
Yeah. That word's confused me for years.
Yeah.
Because last time I was in Japan 3 years ago, there was a lot of native English speakers, and talking to them in the kitchen, because we had a communal kitchen. It's I'm trying to describe this dish that I was gonna make the next day. and then there's this paprika, and they're like, what? And I'm like, trying to describe it because I just for some whatever reason I haven't stumbled across the word bell pepper until then.
Yeah.
And it's like, why bell pepper? Where does that even come from? I'm like, but it's not a pepper. It's not in any way spicy.
Yeah. Yeah, and then paprika, to me, is a powder. It's the spice. The red,
Yeah, you have the paprika powder.
Yeah. So that's paprika to me.
Yeah.
But words have just become interchangeable for me. I said this yesterday when we were talking about identity. My thing, instead of being like, this is the right way to call this, or this is the right term, is just like, okay, yeah, fine. You can also call it that.
Yeah.
That's also fine. I've given up on trying to
distinguish between it.
But so I don't even know what my terms are for anything. So as I was cutting this morning, I said paprika. I was like 180 grams of paprika, and then I was like, why did I just call it paprika? And I said aloud to myself, I don't even speak my own language anymore. I don't even know. I don't know what anything is. I can't remember which is the Japanese term now, which is the European term, which is the American term. Yeah, it's very weird. Very, very
but
weird.
English is kind of weird. It's like, for whatever reason, some words that are just standardized the same in a bunch of other languages, for some reason is different in English.
Yeah.
Like pineapple.
Remind me what it is.
Where it's ananas,
yeah.
or something similar to that in literally every other language.
Yeah.
But in English, it's pineapple.
And it's neither from a pine nor is it an apple.
No, it's like, how did you come up with that?
I think the etymology for that, I believe, is that it looks like a pine cone. The outward appearance of it is like a pine cone.
But how did English never get influenced by a different language? How did it not pick up ananas?
And another weird one is, this is not only English, but like avocados.
Yeah.
The fruit avocado is from Mexico. It's a fruit with a very specific, very recent origin. It's not like there's a lot of foods that are prehistorically traded, so they were everywhere already by the time we started having records. I mean, the Spanish encountered the avocado for the first time with like the Nahuatl Aztec people. So you'd think that avocado would be like the Nahuatl word or the Aztec word, but and also it sounds Spanish, right? Avocado.
Yeah, it does.
But actually in Spanish it's not called avocado. It's called aguacate.
Really?
Yeah, and then I think the Nahuatl word is also something different. Sorry, I don't have all the facts ready to tell this super interestingly, but it's just very interesting that avocado sounds so Spanish.
Yeah.
And yet it's not the Spanish word.
Is there any chance someone else was like, it's from Spain? It should sound something like this.
Well,
or maybe they heard the original word and couldn't quite remember it.
But in sometimes in old English manuscripts, the fruit is referred to as the advocate pear.
Why?
I don't know. So apparently avocado is a corruption of the English word advocate.
Oh, okay.
Advocate pear. I guess because they were pear-shaped.
Yeah.
But yeah, advocate pear became avocado somehow. It's one of those like, just the actual etymologies are so much stranger than anything you could imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's why I think you get these folk etymologies sometimes where people make up stories for where words come from.
Yeah.
But they aren't true, but they make more sense than whatever the truth would be.
Yeah. I guess you could also kind of, for some things, you could kind of make a story as a mnemonic to remember the word.
For sure.
That probably occurs for a lot of people who are learning other languages.
I've done it with Japanese.
Yeah.
Especially for remembering kanji.
Yeah.
You probably have as well.
I've got so many weird stories about kanjis.
Yeah, go for it. Share a kanji story.
What's the
with
first
me.
one that comes to mind?
I'm going to turn on this light.
Yeah.
You can go ahead.
No, it's like when I'm looking at a kanji, I immediately know my own story to remember it. But when you just ask me point blank, I cannot think of a single kanji. It's like,
I'll tell you one while you think, because it's the one it's the first one I really thought of that I was proud of thinking of. You know the kanji for fish, for sakana?
yeah.
So it's the like chonchon at the top, and then basically it's the rice field
This is very, very easy to imagine for listeners.
Oh yeah, it's not at all.
Tung at the
It's
top.
very hard. Well, and plus, there's like names for the radicals for people
Yeah.
who study that stuff.
Yeah.
But like that's
not
going
gonna
to
say
help
anything
either.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll describe it the way my mnemonic works. There's a part at the top that kind of looks like it could be a hook.
Yes.
It's a line and then like another jagged line,
Yes.
like a hooked line
Yes.
coming off of that line, and it's very small at the very top of the character. And then the middle part of the character is basically a square chopped into 4 parts.
Yeah.
Like four quadrants. And with that part by itself is the kanji for rice field,
Yes.
right? And then at the bottom there's 4 short lines that are coming off the bottom of the rice field kanji.
Yeah.
And the way I remembered this, again, maybe I'm stereotyping Japanese culture a little bit, or I was to remember this, is that it's a hook pulling a rice field out of the water, and the 4 lines at the bottom are like water dripping off of the rice. So rice field being food, fish or food that you like, and that has no relationship to the actual etymology of the kanji. It's just how I remembered it.
Yeah. No, because for that particular kanji, I always kind of imagined it as a fish that's been fished up. Now it's dead. So
Yeah.
there's a fish kind of on its side. So like the top, the hooky part on top is like the head.
Yeah.
This is a pointy end.
Yeah.
And then the 4 parts at the bottom of it
Oh,
is like
fins.
the tail.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's actually closer to the real etymology.
Because there's different kanjis have different origins. So like for
Yeah.
some of them it's because they imagery wise look like the item they're
Yeah.
trying to describe, but then there's all the abstract ones that don't.
Yeah.
And
Anything
Yeah.
that's a combination, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like pig, for example. The buta, that kanji. That one is also it's a head with 4 legs and a tail, and it's kind of in that rounded shape. And I believe it's also in the shape of a slaughtered animal lying on its side.
yeah.
But
yeah.
but so that one's the shape one. But then like house is a pig under a roof.
Yeah.
Because your house
that's
is
true.
the place you take your pigs when you put them under a roof. I mean, supposedly.
Yeah. And then you have some kanjis that to me are just kind of disturbing, like the kanji for cheap. It's a woman under a roof.
Okay, but
That's
that I'll defend that one because it didn't originally mean cheap.
Yeah, I mean safe.
It means safe,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
If your
That's true.
wife is under a roof, you feel safe.
Yeah.
She's safe, and also
Yeah,
it means comfortable or reassured,
Yes.
right?
Yes, that's
So
true.
if your wife is inside, you feel reassured. So it's sexist in a different way.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm trying to think of different kanjis, but but everything I've been writing lately has been my computers. Like I've forgotten how to handwrite stuff. I just don't remember radicals anymore.
The kanji for man as well.
Yeah.
It's field power.
Yeah.
It's literally just the rice field character and then the character for power.
Yeah.
Which that to me tells me whoever came up with that character, whoever was dividing men and women into categories and coming up with ways to write them, wasn't thinking about themselves. It was like, what can we use men for? Like, now they work in the fields, like, you know what I mean? It was some noble bureaucrat person who
Yeah.
wasn't actually doing any work.
In China.
Yeah, right.
Thousands and thousands of
Right,
years ago.
going like, okay, those are the ones that we use to work in fields.
Yeah.
And then these are the womb ones, right? Because the woman one they think is the shape of a womb.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like these ones work in the fields and these ones have babies, and that's
Yeah.
what they're good for.
Yeah,
Like,
it's fair. It's not terrible. Like coming from a 1,000-year-old perspective, that's pretty fair.
yeah, I mean, yeah. Most of when you really get into human history, we've mostly been terrible to each other, to ourselves.
That's true though.
Yeah.
And then also there's like the small highlights, like the word for like ski is a woman with a
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
And that's adorable.
Yeah. I like that take of it because I've heard other Westerners like call that kanji creepy because they read it as meaning like female child. But you're reading it as being a woman with a child, which
Yeah.
I think those are both equally valid. Like you can see either one of
Yeah,
those in that.
yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I see a woman next to a child, so for me that's natural assumption, but
Yeah. No, I've actually never even heard anyone say that one.
Really?
Before, yeah. I also like learn.
yeah.
Learn is a child with a hat on.
Gaku.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, not manabu.
I was thinking of
yeah.
narau.
Yeah. Sorry, not narau or manabu. I mean the learning.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
gaku, gakko. Yeah. Child. It's a child going to school with a hat on.
Yeah, that's true. It's pretty nice.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for coming on. I feel like now that we're sharing kanji trivia, maybe the conversation sort of run its natural course. I really appreciate the input about stuff from Norway. Maybe if you don't mind, we could do a follow up on Skype at some point if I think of any more stuff I want to ask you about, or if you think of anything else that would be cool to share. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you for
Isabel.
having me.